We are just a few hours away from one of the most special moments you can witness. President Biden leaves the White House in a couple of hours to Joint Base Andrews to meet Americans just released from a Russian prison. I have been there when American detainees come home, and it is emotional beyond words. It's a special night in America, and it will be tonight when Evan Gershkovich, Paul Wieland, and other Americans return. This video a few hours ago from Russian TV as they were bundled up and sent to Turkey for the exchange. America and our allies paid a dear price for these innocent men by releasing a Russian assassin, among others, including possible spies. We'll get to that a little later in the show with, as you heard, Ambassador John Bolton. With that, we welcome you to the fairest show on television. And first tonight, you could say, perhaps definitively say, that Trump's plan worked. This morning, I turned on the TV, did my usual survey of news sites to learn that Donald Trump is a racist, and he attacked Kamala Harris's black identity yesterday at the National Association of Black Journalists. The Washington Post put up a headline, quote, Trump's comments on Harris's race moves contest into new phase. Bingo. That is exactly what Donald Trump wanted. We aren't talking about cat ladies or J.D. Vance's feelings on women who don't have kids or Trump being weird, and we are no longer talking about how great Harris is doing in the polls, which, by the way, Kamala Harris is. New polling from Public Opinion Strategy show Harris is up 3 percentage points in Pennsylvania, 2 in Wisconsin, and tied in Michigan. In another new poll from Civics, Harris is ahead nationally by 4 points. This is a seismic shift in 2 weeks, and nobody's talking about it. Trump is absolutely fine with people talking about whether he is a racist or not, because that feeling is baked in. People have been talking about that now for 10 years. In fact, he doubled down on it again today with a Truth Social post in which he called Harris crazy and a stone-cold phony over her black and Indian heritage. MSNBC obediently went into double meltdown mode. Trump doubles down, MSNBC double meltdown. They said the comments renewed focus on Trump's history of racist attacks. So let me explain to you how this all works. You're not going to hear this anywhere else on cable news. The media lives in New York, and they spend summers in the Hamptons. And the view from there is quite uniform. They view Trump as a racist, and they say he used racist dog whistles because his base likes it, or he flirts with racist dog whistles because it fires up the base. You heard it on lots and lots of cable shows last night and today. Literally every newspaper and website had the same headlines. It means everybody was at the same cocktail parties last night. Wall Street Journal, Trump taunts Harris over her racial identity. New York Times, at journalist meeting, Trump questions Harris' racial identity. LA Times, Trump attacks Harris' identity. Washington Post, Trump derides Harris over her heritage. So let me tell you what's really going on, because I've covered Donald Trump since 2015. I've been to his rallies more than I can count and talked to his supporters. That's actual reporting, rather than sitting in a New York studio pontificating or out at cocktail parties in the Hamptons. Something very different happened yesterday than what you're being told. Trump did not like the herd narrative of Harris's rocket-like ascension, so he decided to single-handedly change the subject. Yes, all the New York elite were aghast at their cocktail parties, and they will be this weekend. But Trump doesn't care, because this doesn't change the race. It doesn't matter. For the zillionth time, all the people who hate Trump, all the people who look at his fans as racist hicks, took the bait. They did exactly what Donald Trump wanted them to do. It is actually that simple. We begin tonight with Hogan Gidley, former White House Deputy Press Secretary in the Trump administration, and Franco Ornez, White House correspondent for NPR. Gentlemen, good to see you. Thank you. Hogan, we can stipulate that things work, but is Donald Trump really want America to be sitting around talking about Kamala Harris's ethnic heritage and his feelings about it?
What he wants the people to talk about not only is just her radical agenda, but that she is a liar and that she is a phony. And what he did last night, look, there are a lot of times when I'm around Donald Trump and he says something, I think to myself, whoa, I don't know if I'd have done that. And then I realized he was actually ahead of the curve and knew what was going to happen. He wagged the dog. He moved the media where he wanted to go. And then subsequently, what you find out on social media is that there were plenty of times that Kamala Harris was touted by the media as being the first Indian to hold a particular office. She herself went on television, cooked with Mindy Kaling.
So this is a conversation that Donald Trump wants.
Right. But what I'm saying is, it goes back to the broader message, which is she is a phony and will do anything and say anything to get elected, up to and including what race she decides to identify with at any given time. And when Vivek Ramaswamy comes out and says she talked about being an Indian just to get ahead, we had black people against Kamala Harris on the internet saying the same thing, saying, wait a minute, she's not really black, I'm confused. That's the conversation now, and it's shifted.
To that point, Franco, the media loves this conversation when it involves Donald Trump and race because they think calling him a racist and somehow changes that. Is having the conversation shift a good thing for Donald Trump?
I mean, I don't know if I would totally agree with those points. I mean, I definitely agree with you that it changed the conversation. He was having, the momentum that he had post-debate with Biden, post-convention, Harris's announcement. It was really in Harris's, really changed the conversation. I agree with you that it changed that conversation. That said, Trump is also looking at suburban women voters, and I don't know that this conversation, these comments, these questions about race and identity help him there. I do think it changes the conversation, but I think I'm not sure he's loving the idea of this being so much of a talker.
Well, by the way, you are in, I don't know if you would say good company or not, but you are in a lot of company when you say that. Bill O'Reilly, Brian Kilmeade on Fox News, and Vivek Ramaswamy all echoed what you said. Take a listen.
Donald Trump blew it, and the happiest person in the country tonight is Kamala Harris. Because she's sitting there cackling, look at this, look at Trump. He's just alienated millions of black voters.
He did crap the bed today. The only question is whether he's going to roll around in it or get up and change his sheets.
I also don't think that it's a winning issue to bring up Kamala Harris, Indian, black. It doesn't matter.
I do believe that we need a bit of a reset in this campaign. If we're being honest and being clear-eyed.
Joe Hogan, you're saying all those guys are wrong.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to point out, they're missing the broader message of what that comment was meant to do, which was erode her credibility.
Well, if they're missing the broader message, didn't Donald Trump screw up in delivering the message?
No, I'm saying what he's doing is trying to reset the conversation about her being a fake and a phony. And he did so by pointing to the very core of her essence and her being, which is she goes around on one hand, some days talking about that she's black, some days she says she's Indian. So he's trying to kind of go back to the core, which is she's a phony. And on top of that, she's radical, right? That's what he wants to be talking about. Now, we can debate whether or not the way he did that is the way that he should have done it. But the conversation will ultimately, between now and the election, obviously shift to the issues and the policies.
Well, okay, so let me see if I can put a finer point on this, right? He wants the conversation to be, she was for open borders, now she says she wants to secure the border. She was for defund the police, now she says she's a prosecutor. He wants to compare and contrast those. But frankly, to this point, there is this group of journalists who seem every time to take this bait, right? They play into Donald Trump's hand. Is there no recognition among the White House press corps and in the broader press corps that they're just sort of like following Donald Trump along like a fish on a lure?
I mean, I think they're covering, I think I am a member of the White House press corps. I think we're covering the news. I think we're covering it fairly. And I do think, obviously, Trump has very, very skilled. Hogan and I talk about this a lot. Trump knows how to generate headlines. He knows how to drive a narrative. Is there some hook in the mouth there? Perhaps. But I would also argue that in that message, some of what Trump was trying to make, the case that he was trying to make to the NABJ, some of it was lost or wasn't talked about as much. He made an economic argument. He talked about illegal immigrants perhaps taking jobs from black Americans. We're talking today about this identity, Harris's identity. So I think he did, in some ways, he didn't get that message across as strongly as he potentially could have.
Now, when I watched him, I thought this was an enormous missed opportunity on a lot of levels to connect and to change the conversation. Can argue about how he was treated there. But what's interesting, Hogan, is that sometimes on issues of race, Donald Trump is incredibly nuanced and beyond gracious. At other times, he seems obtuse and almost welcome and relish in the fight of being called a racist. So we're going to compare what he said about Kamala Harris yesterday to what he said about Tiger Woods, also a black Asian American in 2019. Take a listen.
At 21 years old, he became the youngest Masters champion of all time and the first person of African American or Asian heritage to win the Story Tournament or any of golf's four majors. As a New York Times headline said the next day, Woods tears up Augusta and tears down barriers. Incredible achievement.
You may have been in the crowd when that happened.
I was right there.
All right, there you go. You saw the smile.
Like golf, it's Tiger Woods.
There you go. Okay, but if Donald Trump is the master of the media puppeteering that we are all, I think, agreeing in one way or another that he is, Hogan, why would someone who is actively courting the black and Latino vote, who knows how to speak about these issues graciously, invite being called a racist?
Again, he's not inviting being called a racist.
Yes, he is.
The media just calls him that. It doesn't matter what he does. It doesn't matter what he says. The guy was opening up his clubs to black people and Jewish people before most of those people were out of local news. So he's been doing this for a long time. He's welcoming to all people. That's not the point. The point goes back to what he's trying to say in front of that crowd is, don't believe the narrative that she's all of these firsts in this particular category, because she's used categories as politicians do for whatever they need to do to get ahead. That's what he was trying to say, and I think that's what he said. And as it continues to kind of play out on social media, you're starting to see examples on both sides of that. We can debate whether or not that's good.
Right.
I'm saying that's what's occurring.
And you're starting now to see this conversation about Kamala Harris that I think Kamala Harris's people would rather not have be out there. Okay, so, Branko, where's the end of this arc? This ends up with a reset, and I think you pointed out, all of the topics that Kamala Harris and the Democrats would like to be in the media news cycle right now are no longer there, right?
I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, look, there's certain narrative that, was going very well for Harris. You were talking the poll figures. Yeah. You were talking also about the momentum that she has. I mean, you have a big moment today in the release of hostages. They're going to have a big greeting at Joint Base Andrews. I think that is a narrative that is going to be talked about a lot today and tomorrow. That is something they're going to want to be in the news, and that's obviously very political as well. It's not a political event, but because of the time that we are in right now, it is 2024 at a political time, there is a political aspect to it. So it's going to be, I think there's still issues that they are, pleased that are going on. But would they, I'm not sure they mind actually African Americans being concerned and certain constituencies, suburban women being angry at Trump for those remarks.
All right, fair enough. Gentlemen, good to see both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hogan, as always, my friend, thank you. We see Kamala Harris a lot these days, an awful lot, but we do not hear from her much. Why she may never have to answer reporters' questions. And those released U.S. hostages will arrive home shortly. You can see them there in the air. Why it will not be the legacy-defining moment Joe Biden wants it to be.
President Trump has said repeatedly that he could have gotten the hostages out without giving anything in exchange. What do you say to that? What do you say to President Trump now, former president?
Why didn't he do it when he was president?
Kamala Harris now flies with a full press pool everywhere she goes. But she talks to them less than Joe Biden ever did. In fact, in the 11 days since becoming the apparent nominee, the Democratic nominee, she has not had a single meaningful interaction with the press. No big interviews, no press conferences, not even a softball appearance on MSNBC. Jammu Green was an advisor for the Clinton campaign 2008, joins us now. Good to see you. What is Kamala Harris so scared of in talking to what would seemingly be a friendly White House press corps?
Well, thanks for having me, Leland. Nice to see you again. I wouldn't say that Vice President Harris is afraid. I think I heard her say just a couple of days ago, if Donald Trump has something to say, he should say it to her face. And I do just have to say that I think you nailed it on the head when you talked about Donald Trump and his intentions with going to the National Association of Black Journalists yesterday. He changed that conversation. Yeah. He comes across as being strong. And unfortunately, a lot of my friends and colleagues on the left fell for it hook, line, and sinker, as well as the media.
Well, Thank you. We try to, they say blind squirrels get an acorn every once in a while, so thank you. But I come back to this. If Kamala Harris says, hey, if you want to say it to my face, Donald Trump, show up at a debate. By all accounts, they're going to debate in September. But I know there have been dozens of media organizations who have all put in requests for interviews with her. And she's a woman from a ticket, Biden-Harris, in a party that says the press are essential, and bashing the press is a threat to democracy. So why wouldn't she be giving interviews, you think?
I'm sure she will be giving interviews. I'm not in the middle of the Harris campaign, but I know they will be talking to the media as much as possible in the next 95 days. Look, all of this has come together really quickly. I think we have seen a campaign get started and launched in one of the strongest ways that you could, and we've got 95 days. I expect to see her talking to the press quite frequently.
It would be hard to have a better start, right? You're coronated rather than having to run. You're handed this huge war chest of $200 million. You've got everybody's endorsement right off the back. It'd be hard to be in a stronger position. Something struck me as interesting yesterday when Rachel Scott of ABC News was talking to Donald Trump. We'll take a look and have a conversation.
A lot of people did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today. You have used words like animal and rabid to describe black district attorneys. You've attacked black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've called yourself the candidate of law and order. Yeah. When Time magazine asked you if you would consider pardoning all the rioters, you said, yes, absolutely. Sure. You called them patriots. We're talking about people that were seen beating officers with flagpoles, dragging them down the stairs. They're on video. Have you seen that video, sir?
Oh, really? Well,
you would pardon those rioters?
What do you think the reaction would be if a white journalist was that aggressive with Kamala Harris?
Look, I think we have to start with just the fact that we've seen, in previous campaigns, whether it was Megyn Kelly and now the journalist yesterday, Donald Trump can't handle strong women. He doesn't like to interact with women who are not going to just sit and listen to what he has to say. And I think he was very, very intentional in going into what has been said, the belly of the beast, so that he could come across as being strong. He could come across as actually being attacked by these black women as he is running against a black South Asian woman. And that was very intentional. I don't usually go around complimenting former President Donald Trump, but he was disciplined in his message. He wanted to go in there, come across as pushing back against these very mean black women, his, probably definition, and then his campaign will be able to, in this age of digital prowess with campaigns, he's going to cut up that interview. He's going to make himself look.
He already has, right? Donald Trump is a.
And we all
no, he is. Donald Trump's the best victim that there ever was. He always is, and has always figured out how to make himself one. But Donald Trump's showing up, and this is where I have the problem, and that is that he's showing up. He's having the conversations. He's walking into, you said it, the belly of the beast. I mean, I'm thinking if Kamala Harris walked in to Fox News and said, "Hey, here I am. Put your 3 best panelists and go at me." She's not doing that, and I'm wondering, just to go back to what I said at the beginning, why not?
Look, I think this campaign has gotten off, like you said, to an incredible start, $200 million raised, and it's all happened very fast. We've got 95 days. They're going to be talking to as many voters as possible. I don't think that we can compare a campaign that's basically been running since 2020, the Trump campaign, and what is happening with Vice President Harris's campaign. She had a schedule that she had to stick to and is going to continue to broaden her access as now she is the de facto nominee. I think what is really important that we on the left, I would hope, recognize is that he succeeded in his plan yesterday in just driving a message that will pull black voters probably just at the margins, whether it's 2-3%, whatever he can do to really pry this very negative message into the Democratic base. And that's why it is so important. That's the work that I do at We Defend Truth, to inoculate these vulnerable populations that are targeted with disinformation, where digital and clearly through an event like the NABJ, digital
you're making the point that it's planned
into the mainstream.
Yeah, you're making the point that it was planned. Jammu, thank you. We got to run, but this was a great conversation. Day 11 of no questions from Kamala Harris, or to Kamala Harris. So we'll keep count. We'll have you back. Thank you.
Thanks, Leland.
Yeah. Live look at the White House. The president's getting ready to leave for Joint Base Andrews. Biden will greet the 3 Americans just traded with Russia. Next, why the trade may make the world a more dangerous place. The White House, the president and vice president will shortly depart by Marine One. President will be on Marine One. Vice President will be on Marine 2 for Joint Base Andrews to greet 3 of the U.S. hostages released through a prisoner swap with Vladimir Putin's Russia. Among the Americans freed, former Marine Paul Whelan, after almost 5 years, and Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, after a little more than a year and a half. A Russian kangaroo court convicted them of espionage charges. They deny it. So does the American government. The Russians get back long-term Putin henchman and assassin Vadym Kraskovkov. He's a Russian intelligence agent arrested in Germany for killing a Putin enemy. Ambassador John Bolton is with us, former national security advisor under President Trump, ambassador to the United Nations. Good to see you, sir. You and I both woke up early to this news. I'm wondering if this doesn't sum things up. The world is a more righteous place, especially with Evan and Paul back in America, but it is also a more dangerous place because of the price we paid.
Well, everybody should certainly welcome the fact that the Americans and others were released from their extremely unjust Russian incarceration. But what's happened here, to be clear, is a hostage swap that violates all the principles that Ronald Reagan laid down about how not to deal with terrorists and terrorist regimes like the one in Moscow. This is not a spy for spy swap. This is not a POW for POW swap. This is criminals for innocent Americans swap. And if you look at the overall shape of the exchange, it's like Putin is cleaning house in his Russian prisons. They've got 7 Russian dissidents, in effect, exiled. You say, well, it's better for them to be out of prison than in a Russian prison. Of course, their families and friends are still hostage back in Russia. And so what's happened here is that the administration has sent a signal, as they have before with Brittany Griner, as they did with hostages in Iran, for the right price, we'll buy an American back from you. And every time that happens, it reinforces in the minds of regimes like Russia, in the minds of terrorist groups, that this administration, at least, is in the bazaar. And the only question is, what's the price? That endangers other Americans. Everybody who carries one of those blue passports becomes a piece of currency for some terrorist or some authoritarian regime to grab. It makes all Americans more dangerous, more at risk.
To your point, President Biden was even asked about that a little bit during his press conference, and he made the point, we're telling people not to go places, ... He didn't say this, but to your point, so they don't get grabbed and turned in to a hostage. The administration's taken a victory lap on this, and again, I think all the time about people coming home, what it would have been like if when I was overseas, I'd gotten grabbed, and what it would be like for me to come home, for my family, and how much that would have meant. So there's an emotional part of this that you really, I think, have to think about. But then there's the larger sense, which is what we're talking with you about, is that the administration seems to want so much credit for this, and at least 2 of these people were people who Putin grabbed under Joe Biden's watch.
Yeah, and let's be clear, at least by the count I've seen publicly available, there are still 8 Americans being held by the Russians. He's still got the coin of the realm for what else he wants. Why was it important for Putin to get back this KGB agent convicted of murder in Germany and a lot of these other agents about which not much is known, but you can see that they were clearly operatives? They want to find out what these people have divulged, what Russian tradecraft, what Russian assets have been compromised. They want to know what was not divulged that may still be safe. They want to know what Western questioners were asking them. There's real tangible intelligence value to the Russians to get their people back. The value to us is that people being unjustly held get released. And you're right, there's no doubt. Everybody, purely from a humanitarian point of view, welcomes this. And it's I have to admit, the logic of national security is cold. It sounds cold until the next hostages are grabbed. Then you see the logic. What did the Biden administration do during this period of time? How many Russian journalists, quote unquote, did they expel from this country? What kinds of sanctions did they impose? And did they enforce the sanctions, or did they just announce them? Look, this is not the way for the United States to behave. The value of an American hostage to anybody in the world should be zero. We don't trade for them, don't take them.
It is a cold logic, but then when you explain it, it makes more sense. We saw some of the video of those coming off the plane, off the Russian airliner. At least a couple of them were Russian illegals, sort of deep cover operatives that were caught in Slovakia, among other places. Something that sort of got slipped in, and the White House has known this has been coming for a long time, so it's no surprise that last night they released something that perhaps everybody would overlook because of this news and maybe Donald Trump's comments. New York Post front page, 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed just took a plea deal down at Gitmo, and evidently Gitmo is going to be closed, the Guantanamo Bay prison facility, in 6 months, is some of the reporting. Atrocity of justice, 9/11 mastermind, spared death penalty in shocking plea deal. He deserves hell. I heard today at the White House briefing, the White House said they knew nothing about that this was going to happen and read about it in a press release. Does any of that ring true to you?
Well, the fact that the White House isn't running the government definitely rings true. The president hasn't been running much for a long time. But the key point here is this is outrageous. And frankly, it shows the misguided model that was applied to all these people, the idea that somehow these terrorists, these outlaws, these barbarians are entitled to American due process. It may sound hard, but when you get somebody like KSM, the sheik who put all this together, after you find out everything you can in terms of potential intelligence for the United States, what he deserves is, as Winston Churchill suggested in World War II, a drumhead court-martial for the Nazis, and then you hang him, period.
All right. I would say that is a direct response, Ambassador. It is good to see you, sir. Thank you. I know it's been a long day for you. We appreciate you being with us tonight.
Glad to be with you.
Yes, sir. We wrote a lot about the prisoner swap today in War Notes. That's our free daily newsletter with our thoughts on the most important stories of the day. You go to warnotes.com, you subscribe, free every day in your inbox at 4:05 to be exact. You can then reply to the email. You can also forward it to your friends, sign your friends up, and connect with us on social media at Leland Vittert. We read all of your replies, good and bad. Brian writes to War Notes, "You are a moron. Your Kamala worship is stunning." Not worshiping Brian. We just call balls and strikes. Right now, Kamala Harris's campaign is firing like the engines on a Saturn V rocket, back when NASA could actually put people in space. We will tell you the truth. You can do with the truth what you want. Betty writes, excellent War Notes this week, as always. Betty, thank you. Tell your friends. No, seriously, actually tell your friends why you watch NewsNation, why you watch this program, and why you subscribe to War Notes. It's free. warnotes.com. Our gift to you. Ellen writes to War Notes, Trump needs to be seriously realistic and drop Vance if he has any chance of winning. Anyone telling him he made the best choice is no better than Biden's people telling him he should stay in the race. I was weighing my choices until Trump chose Vance. And Ellen, it's a very, very important point. That said, there are very few options for dropping Vance. The last time a VP candidate dropped was Tom Eagleton, the senator from my home state of Missouri, before I was born. Jerry writes to War Notes, I am so nervous about her winning, meaning Kamala Harris. I may leave the country if she does. Jerry, we appreciate you watching. You're not going to leave. Where are you going to go? No, seriously, like where? Switzerland, New Zealand, South Korea? Just like all those liberals didn't move to Canada when Trump won in 2016, you're not going to leave, and we're glad you're still in America. Because America is still the greatest place on earth, and will be, no matter who wins. The frontrunner for Kamala Harris's VP pick will divide the Democratic Party. Yeah, it will. How Josh Shapiro just exposed the left's own problem with bigotry. Now, campaigning on an actual winning issue for Republicans, immigration. It's the type of campaign stop that they would make, pointing out the weaknesses of Kamala Harris, Joe Biden's one-time border czar. So, back to the wall now. Swing state of Arizona is worth 11 electoral college votes. Of course, it is a border state. Border's a big issue there. Arizona Senator Mark Kelly is on Kamala Harris's short list for vice president. And Kelly has taken a much stronger, tougher stance on immigration. Could certainly help Harris on the issue. Here he is talking about the bipartisan border bill on MSNBC's Morning Joe.
This was not meeting the Republicans on the 50-yard line. This was meeting them on the 10-yard line on their side of the field. We realize we've got to get operational control over the border. I realize this. Kamala Harris realizes this. And this legislation was going to do that. This was stopped dead in its tracks by Donald Trump because he wanted to have this as an election issue.
Susan Crabtree, White House and national political correspondent, Real Clear Politics, has been covering Mark Kelly for years and is with us now. Susan, it's great to have you. Welcome back to the program. He's an astronaut, former Navy pilot, obviously an incredible story of resilience and comeback with his wife, Gabby Giffords. What's there not to like?
There are so many great points that make him a strong candidate for vice president for Harris's choice. But I have found there's something really very, very curious, and, just pardon the pun a bit, this idea that his investment, he was a senior advisor to a spy balloon company. And I think this sort of, the Chinese investment sort of flew under the radar from a lot of people in D.C. I wrote these stories about the way he secured this investment from Tencent, which is as you know, is a Chinese telecom conglomerate, huge company, owns WeChat, which has over a billion users. Sure. And it's quite controversial, but he secured that investment directly from Tencent into this company that was originally supposed to be for outer space exploration. They were going to charge about $75,000 to basically rich people to go out into the stratosphere.
So the idea is that he's got too many ties to the Chinese Communist Party, and that ends up being a hit on him, that he's a Chinese plant, or that he's somehow compromised, or it's just bad for attack ads?
Well, I think, the fact that he did secure this personally, and I got that information, I nailed that part down from the CEO, who basically admitted it and put it in a Chinese, she had an interview with the Chinese paper saying that he was responsible. He secured the investor, this relationship with David Wallerstein, which is the Tencent's representative in the United States. Well, the issue, I thought it was an interesting story. I did 2 stories on it in 2020, and they were made into ads. There was a lot of problems with the balloon company. They had an explosion that had some damage to a rented building right next to Raytheon in Tucson. There was a lot of controversy at the local level over this. But then I thought, when we had that Chinese balloon traversing the country, the spy balloon, I thought, wait a second, is there anything that their role, Tencent's role, because it's controlled by the Chinese. No Chinese telecom conglomerate is not controlled by the CCP. Did they gain any knowledge? Because there were discussions about that when they shot down the balloon, there were American parts. So
can we draw a line yet? Can we make an arc between Mark Kelly's company that he ran and the balloon that flew over the United States from China?
Well, I'm not going to make the direct art. I asked the questions, and nobody on Capitol Hill would tell me. The most interesting thing about the story is that they lied to me. The company spokesman said, oh, we got approval by the Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency.
Wow.
And then I said, okay, well, I'll call them and make sure that that's true, because I find that's an interesting point. Good for you. Turns out I contact them through email. They tell me in a very tersely worded email, they suspended the clearance process. So this company is not allowed to do top secret work. They do defense work now. They've transitioned into. Yeah, so these questions need to be answered. He has not been forthcoming about his role in securing the 10-cent investment.
You can only imagine the reporting and the focus that's going to be on Mark Kelly and the background, the issues you brought up, is going to be so much more intense if he's nominated as the vice president versus just as a senator. Susan, it's good to see you as always. Thank you. We'll keep following it.
Thanks so much, Liam, for having me. Thanks for your interest.
Thank you. We're not really sure what the far left, because it's hard to tell what the far left thinks about Mark Kelly. But they're darn sure what they think of this man, Josh Shapiro. How what the left says about Josh Shapiro exposes an enormous problem for Kamala Harris when we come back. Governor possible VP candidate Josh Shapiro, arguably the very best choice electorally for Kamala Harris, canceled his fundraisers this weekend in the Hamptons, where New York's elite summer is the clearest indication yet. He might be at Kamala Harris's side 18 days from now when the Democratic National Convention starts in Chicago. You can see it there, and Democrats want to do everything possible to prevent pro-Hamas demonstrations, riots, whatever you call them, by the anti-Semitic wing of the Democratic Party, called the pro-Hamas folks. Few things would upset them more than picking Shapiro, a pro-Israel Jew. This was their protest when Benjamin Netanyahu showed up in D.C. There's now a Twitter account called No Genocide Josh, dedicated to keeping Shapiro off the ticket because he's Jewish. It's gotten so bad that Adam Schiff, the senator from California, would-be senator, soon-to-be senator from California, tweeted, there are several incredible options for vice president. The superb governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, is one of them. Singling him out or applying a double standard to him over the war in Gaza is anti-Semitic and wrong. Don't go there. Our partners at The Hill wrote progressive sound alarm as Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, VP stock rises. Florida Congressman Jared Moskowitz tweeted, these progressives don't want a Jew. Let's say it out loud. Imagine if moderate Dems say they didn't want a certain minority. The condemnations would be deafening. Yet now we hear much silence. Opinion editor at Newsweek, Younger Sargon, is here. Her new book, Second Class, How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women. I think that's probably the right. The silence is deafening, right? It says everything.
I am really glad to see these high-profile folks coming out and condemning the anti-Semitism of the left's attacks on Josh Shapiro. Of course, every single one of the potential picks for VP is pro-Israel. Josh Shapiro's crime was saying that we would not tolerate, people dressed up like the KKK on college campuses, and thus we should not tolerate people dressed up as Hamas and Hezbollah, right? And for this, he must be eviscerated. I have to say, though, Leland, I'm taking heart not just in the reports that, she's potentially choosing him, but in what it signifies. Because if we know anything about Kamala Harris, it's that she is a flip-flopper, right? She takes the position that she considers to be wherever the center of gravity of the party happens to be. And so if she chooses Josh Shapiro, that tells us that the Democratic Party wants to very consciously sideline the very loud progressive anti-Semitic wing that had been gaining a lot of traction of late. And whether you're a Donald Trump supporter, whether you're a Kamala Harris supporter, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, we should all celebrate the fact that this woman, who never says anything, that's at all in any way original and is always trying to reflect where she thinks the base is, possibly thinks that the base will not tolerate an anti-Semitic snub of Josh Shapiro.
Look at you finding the silver lining. There you go. The optimist is there. But okay, I think maybe not. Put a finer point on this. I think what you're trying to say maybe is not that Kamala Harris ever said anything original. It's that she doesn't say anything genuine. Now, the flip side of what you're saying is that if she gives in to this about Josh Shapiro, okay, and she's worried about these protests that are going to come to Chicago. She's worried that the protests here in D.C. were the warm-up act for Chicago. and she doesn't pick Josh Shapiro. Now you're setting it up that she bended at the knee to the pro-Hamas types, right?
I think that is 100% accurate. I think every Jewish American should be paying very close attention. There is zero excuse for not choosing Josh Shapiro except to cater to the anti-Semites. He is the only pathway she has to victory. He could potentially deliver Pennsylvania. He is wildly popular despite being a Democrat, even though it is a swing state. If he delivers that state, he's delivering potentially the White House for her. For her to say no to that, I mean, he's the only one who has that power who's in the running. So if she says no to that is the Democratic Party telling American Jews you don't have a home here anymore. And so I really hope she picks him, because I don't want that to be the case. I don't want American Jews to be forced to the Republican Party because one of the major parties has said to us, guys, it's over. We're not on your side anymore.
Well, Donald Trump seems to say that, right? That he can't imagine why anyone would be Jewish and vote for a Democrat. True that Kamala Harris is considering Josh Shapiro. Also true that she was a lot tougher on Benjamin Netanyahu and on the Israelis when it came to supporting a ceasefire that would help Hamas than even Joe Biden's been.
Yeah, she talks out of both sides of her mouth, right? On the one hand,
so
she
which side
condemned the Hamas
which side do you believe?
protesters.
You want to be optimistic, and now you're not.
I mean, this is who she is, right? You got to if she's talking out of both sides, it means that the Democratic Party is right now caught between two positions, right? It both wants to cater to the left and it wants to not cater to the anti-Semites. The problem is those are one and the same thing.
Yeah, and look, you point it out all the time on issues of moral clarity. When you try to choose one side or the other, you get caught in the middle. Batya, good to see you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks, Leland.
We don't have the pictures of Andrews Air Force Base up right now. They're not there yet. But we'll give you the White House. President Biden's leaving to go welcome 3 Americans who've been in Russia in prison camps for way, way too long. Tonight's a good night to be proud to be an American. I'll see you on Monday.